Hello, my name is Kirk. My pronouns are they, them. And today I will be talking about BTS and positive masculinity. Um, I've wanted to do something on masculinity for a really long time. The problem with that is that I don't want to do something that's just negative. I don't want to just be like shitting on masculinity, and it took me a while to sort of figure out what I could do, what I could say positively about masculinity. How can I don't like proposing a problem without a solution. And fortunately, BTS has provided a solution. Um, it's going to be a little bit before I start BTS, talking about BTS. So, Army, who's watching this in the future, um, skip or listen to me, whichever. Um, Masculinity. What is masculinity? What does it mean to be masculine? It's um, a very subjective question, right? Masculinity means different things to different people, but generally, um, there's a few sort of things, a few sort of hallmarks that fit together for masculinity that people will say like, oh yes, this is masculinity. Um, and a lot of it has to do with machismo. Machismo is sort of like the hyper masculine, this idea of macho ness, of what it means to be a man. And I know that probably people watching this sort of already know um, what it might mean, what that means to be macho, to be masculine. It's all of these ideas about being tough, no emotions, you never show your fear or pain, you're never vulnerable to anyone, you're tougher than everything, you are like basically not a human being at all, you just, ugh, tough. Uh, and that is sort of like in a nutshell what masculinity is, right? That's the way we see it in the West. That's the way it's been sort of developed and evolved into being. It wasn't always this way in the West. Masculinity was not always this sort of like really strange, um, like extremely extreme self denial, the way that it is now. But it sort of evolved and developed into being this way. And I think that recently, especially in like recent years, like maybe like the past 20, 30 years, like since the 80s, which is like more like 40 years ago, there has been this sort of concentration, like this. They're boiling down like the awful traits of Western masculinity into their purest possible compound, which we see today. It's like dudes putting, I don't know why this example came to mind, but dudes putting those like ball things on the back of their trucks. That's like an example of that. It's like, yeah, I'm a man, bro. And it's like a lot of masculinity sort of revolves around this sort of insecurity about being perceived as masculine. It's like you gotta be a man, bro. Be a man. And the sort of threat of not being perceived as a man, is what sustains masculinity. Masculinity like defines itself as not being feminine, not being gender fluid, not being all of these things that it has created as negative. So like in the masculine world, uh, we live in a masculine world, I guess. Let me start there. It's like we live in a world where men have put together the rules about everything, not just the laws, but sort of social norms and what is acceptable and what is not, and what is feminine and what is not. And so masculinity has created this whole like network of social relations where like to be feminine is to be bad and to be masculine is to be good. Masculinity is associated with toughness, strength, mental ability, intelligence, whereas femininity is associated with softness, demureness, surrender, nature, all of these sort of like binary of masculine and femininity. And we know, I say it all the time, nothing is a binary. That sort of the false binary that masculinity created, is impossible to live up to. It's no one can live up to this ridiculous gender role binary that masculinity created, that Western society created and demanded of everyone. And so that's where, because it's impossible, and because it's so strictly separated, so it's such a binary, it's impossible for men to live up to the masculinity that they created in the first place. It's impossible. And that's why we get these sort of things where it's like you learn all these behaviors. And like growing up as a boy, I was socialized as a boy who would become a man. That is sort of the world I lived in. I lived around in that masculine world and socialized in the masculine way. You learn all of these behaviors to like check other boys, other men on their masculinity. It's like there's that like stupid, I'm thinking about like middle school shit right now, right? Like the stupid like, oh, like look at your fingernails, and then it's like, oh, if you go like this, you're gay. And like I've said before, to be gay in the masculine world is literally the worst possible thing, because it means you're basically a woman. And obviously men are better than women is how masculinity frames everything. It's like, but you see in this sort of competitiveness of masculinity that it's not just about yourself internally being a man as an individual unit, being the best man you can be and trying to live up to this masculine ideal. It's also about excluding others from that masculine ideal. You're trying to prove that you are more of a man than other people. There's a relation. It's not just internal in yourself. You are trying to assert that you are more of a man than other people. And that's what, if you look at it that way, if you look at it in terms of this, like, I don't even want to say competitiveness, because to me being competitive like has a good connotation. It's like this sort of like combativeness that men have with each other, and if you understand that combativeness, you'll understand a lot of these like strange sort of masculine behaviors a lot better. So like recently, like literally yesterday, I was on the train and I saw a couple, apparently a cis man and a cis woman, come onto the train, and the woman had a mask on and the man had a mask, but it was down here around his neck, and he was talking at his, I'm assuming, girlfriend, talking at her, just mask off on a train, standing way too close to me, and eventually like the woman sort of like met eye contact with me and like looked at me apologetically and like dragged her man off to another part of the train that wasn't crowded, that they could have just stood in and would be less harmful to other people. But that I know that other people have observed this phenomenon of men not wearing masks and being out with their woman partner who is wearing a mask, and that also sort of comes from this obsession with the binary. It's like it is regarded as feminine to do what other people tell you to do. It's regarded as feminine to show concern for others and not yourself. It's like you don't have to follow the rules because you're better than everyone. And all of this sort of stuff unfortunately around like a life or death situation. But it's like you see that masculinity sort of like harms itself. And there's been, like, not to get too far into this, but there's all of these examples of like prominent conservatives talking about how, oh, like, I don't want to wear a mask, fuck this, you don't have to wear a mask, this is bullshit, and then they die of COVID, which is like, all right, it's like you're literally putting lots of other people in danger and yourself, but in order to prove that you're a man, in order to prove that you're the most manly. And that's and because there is that combative aspect, that competitive aspect of masculinity, where it's like you're not just trying to be the best man for yourself, you're trying to be the best man, better than everyone. You get these situations where as long as there's one man who's like gonna challenge everyone else on their masculinity, it's like all you need is one man to say that whatever action, whatever thing of life is feminine. As long as there's one man saying that something is feminine, all of the other men, in order to prove their masculinity, are gonna try to avoid that feminine thing. And you see in that how just like how masculinity is like this horrible vicious cycle that like constantly exponentially worsens itself, you know, and then until we end up we're at a point where like men themselves are like cannot survive, cannot live up to these masculine ideals. And it's and that's why we see such a high death rate among young boys. I think suicide rate is that all of these young boys unable to live up to, unable to, not wanting to crush themselves in order to like fit into this box of masculinity. It's really awful. Like masculinity does hurt us all. The way that Western masculinity is so toxic, so damaging. And whether you know it or not, yes, you watching this, we all live in a masculine world, and you have internalized masculine ideas about your own identity and who you are as a person. And like for me, I can say personally, I find sort of that masculine reactivity, reacting to the world, needing to prove myself better, needing to prove that I am more of a man, even though I'm not a man. It comes out sometimes, and it's because we've internalized the socialization, and the whole fucking world has been for so long dominated and constructed by this idea of Western masculinity. And I told my partner that story about the guy on the train not wearing a mask, just being such an oblivious asshole, and like how awful it is that masculinity has been associated with this not benign thing, but life or death situation. And she said to me, "It's like, okay, but do you want to hear like a positive masculinity thing?" I was like, "Yeah, fuck yeah." And she told me the story about this video she was watching of BTS, like at a fan meetup or something, where there's just like a huge crowd of people. They're standing up in a line, just like, "Hey," like waving at everyone, and you hear all of these young women, all of these like these voices just like screaming, shouting, like "Yay!" And above all of that, there is one dude just in a like huge low voice just shouting, "Jimin, Jimin, Jimin," and you just watch as like all the BTS boys are just like kind of like chuckling to themselves, like looking over at Jimin to see what his reaction to that is. And it's like, that is so endearing. Thinking about this man who has come to a BTS fan meet to express without reservation his love for Jimin specifically, not all of them. He's not just a fan of BTS the music group. He's a fan of Jimin. His bias is Jimin. And oh god, it just made me so happy to hear that. And when she told me that story, the story about this video that she watched, I realized like there is the positive masculinity. That's what it is. BTS. If you are not familiar with BTS is a Korean pop idol group. 7 members. You have Kim Namjoon, Kim Seokjin, Min Yoongi, Jung Hoseok, Park Jimin, Kim Taehyung, Jung Jungkook, BTS. Okay, I don't have the fan chant down yet, but 7 members, right? And they're young guys. They are like in their mid to late 20s now. They've been an idol group for a really long time, and they've very recently broken into sort of like the American mainstream. And thank God that they have. Their music and their work celebrates this sort of love, self-love, a kind of love that men are very afraid to espouse. Masculine men feel like they should be perfect already. Like men aren't human beings. They're perfect creations of the Lord. They're men. They don't have to improve. They don't have to worry about self-help, self-care, self-love. They don't have to worry about that stuff. But BTS says that they do. BTS, their message, they have this whole like tour and albums just called Love Yourself, and like lyrically just like communicating to their fans, telling them like, please love yourself, please love yourself, you deserve to love yourself. And what a compassionate message that is, what a vulnerable message that is, to be able to tell someone that they deserve to love themselves is inherently a sort of soft, vulnerable thing to communicate to someone else. But beyond that, they also have music where they are communicating these sort of like dark, troubling thoughts, like worrying about their own lives and being honest about it. And I think this is important. It's not like there's not other artists that do this, but I would say that music, in an interesting way, is something that is a form of entertainment that is highly feminized in our society. It's viewed as feminine to do music because it deals with emotions. It's just, and that's just sort of like one of those weird like binary constructions, like unless music is like super hard and like heavy metal or like I don't know, like what, like it has to be like the best or the coolest or the most interesting or new or harsh noise or experimental music, in order to be masculine. It can't just be pop or fun. You know, Carly Rae Jepsen is like a fun pop artist, and men stay the fuck away from that. Men stay the fuck away from fun as often as they can, because fun also is feminine. Men, are you okay? Are you okay, men? But beyond BTS's music, they also exhibit this sort of camaraderie and affection between each other, and in their personal lives. Not that we know that much about their personal lives. They're very, very, very well managed. They're they are like literally probably the world's biggest entertainment act right now. So everything we see of them is, of course, like, it's managed to a certain degree. And yes, I just want to say to Marion, yes, that is why Carly Rae Jepsen is loved in the gay community, because obviously gay men have been able to extricate themselves from that sort of toxic masculinity to a certain degree. Let's like leave that asterisk, a big asterisk on that. To a certain degree, gay men have been able to relieve themselves of that toxic masculinity. But go back to BTS. There's actually a show that they make called Run BTS. It's a reality / variety / game show where the 7 of them do all of these things. Sometimes they're competing to cook a meal together. Sometimes there's just like random, like I remember the first Run BTS episode I ever watched is like they're in this huge mall that closed down so that they could film this show, and there's just like the staff has left all of these like really like random, like you have to collect all of these stickers, and once you have enough stickers you can go play like games like Chom Chom Chom, or like all of these other like sort of like Korean word language games, and like all of these things in order to earn stars. It's like there's like it's really dope. Actually, I highly recommend watching Run BTS, because unlike American entertainment, the games are complex and really interesting. There's another episode where they play a sort of like murder type game, if you remember playing those as a kid or in school or whatever, where they're in like BTS Village, and like some of them are imposters, so it's like Among Us or whatever, where they're trying to figure out who the imposters are by finding clues, by solving riddles, by playing the same kind of like Chom 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 or word games and stuff like that. And it's really cool. It's really great to watch them, and you just see sort of like, no matter, like, I want to say this because I think it is sort of like a masculine rationalist form of denial to say like, oh, we can't know what they're like, we can't know what BTS is like, we can't know what stars are like because they're so managed. We only see what they want us to see. So that must mean we don't really know who they are. But it's like, I've watched literally like dozens, if not over 100 hours of BTS content and Run BTS and stuff like that. And it's just like impossible. The camera doesn't lie, and no one can hide themselves that fully from the camera. And so like maybe like all reality shows, there's like a degree of like fakeness where they reshoot something to have a better story or whatever. it doesn't really matter. You can see their personalities shine through, and their relationship shines through. And so that's the heart of what I want to get to. It's not just that they are being vulnerable and expressing this sort of like non-traditionally masculine love as musicians, but also they express a non-traditional masculine love with each other. That's why I wanted to talk about how BTS is such a good like model or blueprint for what masculinity might look like, what it could be, and how the world could be vastly improved by looking at BTS as a model for masculinity. And when you watch their shows, when you see them interacting with each other, there's like a brotherly affection that no longer exists among brothers in the West, where they're comfortable touching each other's bodies. Like I just watched a clip from one of their recent shows behind the scenes where Jimin is like singing into J-Hope's foot. Like J-Hope is like jokingly like lifted his foot up. It's like, all right, your turn to sing. And Jimin just like jokingly sings a little and holding his foot and just like singing into the foot and just like having fun with each other. It's like such a small thing. It's like, it seems like that shouldn't be a big deal, but it kind of is. It's like, I can't imagine, like, try imagining like two bros that you know, holding each other's feet. Like, that's so weird. And I know that it's not necessarily, it's kind of hard to communicate why that is such an affectionate gesture, but it is. It's like being comfortable with each other's bodies. Sometimes when they're lying down and lying around, they'll like lie on each other and snuggle, and it's so cute. And it's like there is like a component of like, there is like a homoerotic component to some of their interactions, but it's not like, but they're not gay. You know, it's like they allow themselves to be comfortable in a much broader range of expression than Western men typically allow themselves. You don't see it. You don't see it except as a joke, and the joke is that someone's gay. But with them, it's like, it's not a joke. They're just being themselves. They're just loving on each other, just like boosting each other up and holding each other and just being good men with each other, and knowing that it doesn't diminish them to act that way. And that's a huge part of why why BTS's masculinity is vastly superior to the Western masculinity, is because that insecurity that is rampant in toxic Western masculinity is not there, is gone. It is absent from their interactions with each other. You can they might get embarrassed or shy or awkward, but they don't get insecure in that way where they lash out or react defensively. And that's part of what makes it so enjoyable to watch them, watch their interactions. It's like, oh my God, these, like, how rare is it to see men being with each other, being comfortable with each other, being like sensual with each other without that edge of like, are you gay, bro? God, I like, even just uttering that just feels so gross in comparison to the sort of lightness and beauty that the boys share with each other. And the reason that I'm talking about BTS as a model for positive masculinity is, it's not just because they're able to have these sort of tender moments with each other, but they also have they're still men, you know, they're still boys, they're still men, and watching them and seeing the way that they interact with each other is like, looking into a portal that leads to another dimension where masculinity has not been so badly fucked up by Western ideology, Christian ideology, and all that other stuff. It's like, you see them and they're competitive. They like to be the best. Like but they don't have to be the best. And that again goes back to sort of the insecurity, that whether or not they feel insecure about themselves, about their masculinity, and they don't. And that's a huge difference. And like whatever else like happens, I'm not saying that they are never angry, they're never upset, they never fight with each other. They even admit, loosely, in their presence, in shows and in documentaries and whatever, that they have fought, that they have argued, that they have not. It's like, and that's sort of what makes it so believable that this is like coming from within. This kind of like relationship that they have with each other is okay, is acceptable, is doesn't make anyone inferior. And that's sort of the whole ethos of BTS, of their interpersonal relationships with each other, is that no one has to be better than the other. No one has to be the worst. No one has to be the subject of insult or ridicule or the least manly. There isn't that sort of like hyper competitive aspect to it. They are able to exist as men and as men in the public sphere, without expressing that kind of dominance, without expressing that kind of without putting other people down, without degrading others. And that is so beautiful. And I think that's something that we can all really take from that, is that you have to be that way. You have to be who you are for yourself, which men don't do. Men are not doing that. Men are the example, the dictionary textbook example of putting other people down so that you can feel good about yourself, right? Men with their presence, with everything they do, degrade others around them. Men have to prove that they're the best, or at least that they're like allied with the best, right? Like there's some sort of like components of you don't have to be the best, you just have to not be the worst. Like there's that graphic t-shirts like, you don't have to be faster than the grizzly bear, you just have to be faster than your friends, which is like, damn, it's like I was in middle school with a guy who had that t-shirt. It's like, that's fucked up, dude. But I watched Moonlight recently too, and Moonlight does a really good job of portraying masculinity in this way, and it's like, oh god, what a beautiful movie. Highly recommend it. Go watch it. But there's this character, this bully character, who is like so antagonistic, and just like, it's so realistic because the way that he operates is to like, it reminds me of like when I was in middle school and it was like, this is a shark free zone. It's like, this guy is a shark, and he just like constantly looking for someone to put under his thumb, someone he can make do something else, because he is the man. And for masculinity, for Western masculinity to function, there has to be the man. There has to be the one who is better, more manly, stronger, tougher than everyone else, and everyone else has to just sort of like fall in line. And so you see in that movie, like, that guy is like, he's the king, or whatever you want to call it. He's the manliest man, and everyone else sort of has to play his game more or less. There's like a toady character, like a character who is like always following him around, always just like amping him up, hyping whatever he's saying. Like, if the bully bumps into somebody, then the toady character also bumps into them a second later. And there's other characters, like one of the other main characters of the movie who is gay, and is like sort of like is in the closet and sort of like trying to play this masculine game. At one point, that character is forced to beat up the main character, who is also gay, and who are best friends with each other. But the bully forces this guy to do what he says, to beat him up, and he has to do it. He has to do it, or he might be in danger. And that is such, that just sort of like, that story, that those characters read so true, because that is how masculinity operates itself on everyone. Western masculinity, toxic masculinity, whatever you want to call it. There is that hierarchy inherent to it. There's that hierarchy, that combativeness. It's like you have to fight for that position, and if you don't, if you rank in the lowest, you are forever a target to prove you, to put you down, to prove that other people are more masculine than you, and that is just so totally absent with BTS. They're, constantly on Run BTS, they're doing competitions with each other, and whoever gets first, whoever gets last, it changes all the time. They do all of these kinds of different games and like competitions and all of this other fun stuff, and it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter who wins and who loses. Like, the winner gets a prize, sometimes the loser has a punishment, and it's never the worst thing in the world. It's never something awful. Like, sometimes it's just, cleaning up the kitchen after everybody has cooked. It's like the two lowest ranked have to clean up the kitchen, whatever. But they're not made out to be less of a person because they lost. They're not made out to be less of a man because they lost. And that is such a stark difference between how we tend to see masculinity in the Western world and how BTS frames masculinity. There's another aspect that I really wanted to talk about this, which is that the positive masculinity of BTS and their relationships actually exceeds even beyond their reality appearances, even beyond their music, into their fan base. ARMY, there, and it does so in the form of fan fiction. And fan fiction is another thing that has been forever sort of cast aside as feminine, as lesser. It's like, fan fiction isn't real literature, whatever. It's not real writing. But blah 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 blah, whatever. But it's been degraded so that the things that men like more can be raised up. And there is a lot of BTS fanfic, as you might be aware of, from 7 beautiful Korean boys are just gonna generate fan fiction. There's no stopping it. But there's all these beautiful worlds that people create, all of these AUs, alternative universes, or whatever, that people make using BTS members as characters, using them as characters to tell these stories about men being able to be intimate with each other. And I forget who tweeted this, but I saw a tweet talking about how the BTS members, when used in fanfic, are like dolls that the writers of these fictions use as a way of like expressing the desire for a softer masculinity, a gentler masculinity, a masculinity that doesn't have to be 100% or 0. It can live somewhere inside a spectrum rather than on the edge. And it's true. And I've read a few of these. I've read some of them, and it's just like the most pleasurable thing that you could do. I highly recommend it. Probably want to get into BTS a little bit first so you can like know who they are and like what their idiosyncrasies are, and it'll make more sense. But there's all of these really great fics that's just sort of like, like yearning, like it's like some of them are homoerotic. They're like dating, they're having sex or whatever with each other. Sometimes they're brothers, and it's like, it's not necessarily just being like BTS the pop stars. What would BTS the pop stars do? It's like these guys who can blur the line between not traditional masculinity, Western masculinity and something else. there's room to play there. There's room for expression. There's room for desire, for yearning, for seeing, and it's so interesting because it's not necessarily people who are attracted to men who are making these fics. It's not necessarily androphiles, people who want, or like gay people at all, because it's like it's usually it is like gay fanfics where one of them is in love with the other, and they're yearning and they get together, whatever. There are a lot of people who are not attracted to men making these fictions, and to me that says that we so badly want to live in a world where men don't have to act the way that men have to act now. And it's kind of just stunning to see. It's like there are so many of these fictions. There are so many BTS fanfic stories. And I know their fan base is huge, but even so, it's like it's a huge phenomenon, even understanding, even scaling it with the fan base. And it is that way because the way that BTS members are portrayed, the way they portray themselves, allows for breaking down the walls that we sort of know intuitively to be false or harmful. They are able to, using BTS members as characters enables us to envision a world where masculinity is good and not bad. It's what a dream. And I remember now, like, there's a video of like probably the hardest, most masculine member of BTS in terms of like his persona and the things he talks about and writes about. Min Yoongi, Suga. There's a video of Suga at a panel, and he's speaking at the panel, and he's talking about how people aren't allowed to be cute in hip hop. Like no one, like cuteness is not allowed in hip hop. And then he says, "But I'm allowed to be cute." And then he like does like on stage in front of this panel, and just like it is cute. It's like so cute, and it's like that's amazing. It's like literally, the BTS members are expressing the relationship between masculinity and cuteness, between themselves and the rest of what is perceived to be the masculine world, and that's why they're so different than so many other celebrities, pop stars out there in the world, and especially I think because they are shown to us as heterosexual men. We sort of like assume like that maybe they aren't. Maybe it's like who honestly knows? And it sort of doesn't matter. It's like that, and it's not. Let me backtrack a little bit. It doesn't matter that whether they are heterosexual or not. It's sort of, and by taking that out of the picture, by not reassuring us that they're heterosexual, by not like explaining to us that they're gay and this is why their behavior is acceptable, we are allowed into the headspace of seeing in them a masculinity that doesn't have to be characterized as heterosexual or homosexual. We are allowed to sort of envision this world where these men, these performers, are like the gold standard of masculinity. All right. Isabel said, "It's really nice that BTS can set a different example of masculinity for Western audiences, and also from the point of an AFAB non-binary person, it's a much more achievable mask look, in my opinion." Hell yeah. Like, it's like, honestly, BTS rules for so many fucking reasons. Like, I love that. Like, my partner, who is AFAB also, was just talking about, like, maybe getting, like, a K-pop boy haircut and, like, doing one of those looks, and it's like, yeah, that's fucking sick. It's like it's so cool that they give that. It's such a gift that they give to the world in so many ways. Isabel continued, but the industry aspect of it is kind of scary. I think Western audiences also can't always comprehend how Asian standards of masculinity differ from Western standards. Very true. And no need to apologize. I think you can have toxic aspects to it too. For example, the K-pop industry has almost zero mixed gender groups. That's very true. And they try to cover up idols' homosexuality at the same time, constantly setting up homoerotic tension as fan service. That, I'm so glad that you brought this up. This is such, thank you, Isabel, because like I up until now I have been sort of posing this world, posing BTS as sort of like a universal positive, but there is nuance to it, and I think that nuance is important to discuss. Definitely, there are toxic aspects to the K-pop industry, to the entertainment. Entertainment is a very toxic industry. There's like a billion examples of how entertainment is toxic. And especially in the ways that you listed, that is really true. But what my sort of like additional nuance to that is that Korea is a colonized nation. South Korea is a semi-colony of the United States. And they were previously colonized by Japan. Not to say that there can't be toxic masculinity that is derived naturally from Eastern philosophies, Eastern ideologies. Obviously, there are so many examples of non-Western societies that are hypergendered, that are patriarchal. Definitely don't want to imply that that's not the case, that that's not part of it. But I think that there's, especially because the entertainment industry is pretty explicitly Western. Like there is like non-Western entertainment, there is non-Western entertainment industry, but all of the technology, all of the formats, all of the norms of entertainment come from the Western world. And I wonder, I'm not an expert. I don't want to speak out of turn. But I do wonder how much is sort of like from a Western influence versus from the influence of a native influence of the people who are making it. And like talking about colonization and imperialism is difficult in terms of like the cultural aspects, because you can't really extricate what has already happened. You can't say like, well, this part is just is good and just native to Korea, and this part is because of the impact of colonization. There's such a enmeshment of the two. And actually, I think a really good example of how just like a little detail that gave me a really interesting like insight into South Korea's relationship with America via colonialism is in Parasite, the movie by Bong Joon-ho. The child of the rich family, the boy child of the rich family, is obsessed with Native American stuff, like cowboys and Indians stuff. He is like obsessed with it in a way that is like no longer seen, no longer as seen in that way in American entertainment, in American culture in general. And I think I don't want to, like, it's too subtle and too nuanced of a thing to like really get into right now. But if you watch the movie and if you see that, you'll get the vibe, you'll understand. There is a strange, like, sort of complex relationship between the two. And I think that, at least in part, the sort of toxic aspects of Korean entertainment are influenced by that. But beyond that, I think something that is wholly good, something that we can take away from BTS's masculinity that is wholly good is the fix, is the things that or like, not wholly good. Nothing is all good, nothing is all bad. I don't want to like set up a binary like that. But the way that the fans have you know, like broadened the reality of the truth through through their fictions, if that makes sense, is by we make BTS enact these things, make BTS enact these desires, our desires for a less masculine, like a non-hyper masculine, non-Western toxic masculine world. We take the power ourselves and create that world using them as a template, as a base, for that kind of gentler masculinity, that kind of more less harmful masculinity. And again, like I was saying in the beginning, what I would say is the really strong difference between toxic Western masculinity and the masculinity that is that BTS sort of like shows or provides an insight into is Western toxic masculinity is hyper insecure and always needs to put other people down in order to raise itself up. Excuse me. Whereas with BTS, the masculinity feels like it's derived from within each of the members. Like each person is who they are and has relationships with the others, but those relationships are not necessarily hierarchical. They're not necessarily about proving who is the best or who is the most masculine. It's really nice. I really, really, really strongly recommend for people who have not gotten into BTS, who are not already fans, like go to vlive.com, search Run BTS, and just like pick an episode at random. I highly recommend the BTS Village episode. If you want to Google BTS Village, it's a really good episode. Just watch it. It's so great. It's like you will understand right away why it's so affirming and beautiful to see these men acting the way they do with each other, teasing each other, but not in an aggressive way, not in a degrading way, joking with each other, being competitive with each other, being affectionate with each other. Like Vmin, like everybody, people who know BTS know Vmin. They are obviously in love with each other. They wrote a song about being in love with each other. You are my soulmate is and just to talk about that for 1 second, since I brought it up, like they aren't dating according to public knowledge. They're not together in that way according to what we know. But these two men wrote a song calling each other their soulmates. It's like, what an unimaginable thing in the West. Can you imagine if I don't know who's like give me God, I feel like I'm like coming up with references and they're all so dated, like Ryan Seacrest and Eminem. Imagine if Ryan Seacrest and Eminem wrote a song talking about how they are soulmates and they're in love with each other. It's not, you can't do it. They are never gonna happen. They can't, because then they would be admitting all of these things that Western masculinity doesn't accept or doesn't allow. Men aren't supposed to have feelings. It's wild. It's just talking about the characteristics of Western masculinity makes me feel like I'm losing my mind sometimes, because it's like, how could anyone believe this? How could anyone for even a second pretend that this is true? It's like, how can a human being, not have feelings, not have emotions, never cry? Jesus Christ, men, you gotta cry. Just cry. Just fucking cry, dude. Get over yourself. Yeah. So, really, really, really do strongly recommend checking out BTS. This is obviously not SpawnCon. They couldn't afford it. Is a joke, because obviously they could. But really, 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 really recommend it. And I know that probably the people watching this aren't, hypermasculine cis men. I really doubt that like dudes with Oakley shades and and sideburns and a goatee. Don't know why that's my picture of a hypermasculine man, but I really doubt that those guys, guys who never cry, guys who brag about never crying, guys who put other guys down because they're not manly enough, they're not watching this. But you are, whoever you are, and it is really so soothing and pleasant to experience BTS, to experience the masculinity that BTS shows just by existing. I highly recommend it. It's Run BTS is like my go-to, very, very chill, very soothing piece of entertainment. And since I started getting into BTS, since I started watching Run BTS and just like, consuming BTS content like a gallon at a time, like so many other things are just too masculine for me. It's just like too like hard and raw. It's like I was watching Hunter x Hunter recently, and I'm still watching it because it's a good show. It's like a nice show. It's a well-made anime. I'm learning about drawing and animation right now, to like learning how to do it, and it's really cool. And it's like a good show, but it's so manly. It's like everyone is like a man. It's like even that show is like not as masculine and manly as it could possibly be. It's like there's the friendship between Killua and Gon, and that's kind of sweet. They're not really competing with each other. It doesn't really matter like who's best or who's better. That's not the competitive aspect of it, but there's still such like gotta be manly, and like all of the characters are men and all this other stuff. And it's like once you start watching BTS, once you start like taking in this alternate masculinity, this sort of like gentler, kinder, softer masculinity, it'll be hard to go back. It's hard to go back. It's hard to watch. It's hard to watch certain things because it's just like so fucking masculine. It's like, get over yourselves. And that's the thing that here's a fun thing that men don't know. If there are any men who are still watching, congrats, good job, thank you. We are so tired of your bullshit. No one gives a fuck. Like every non-man in the world is just rolls their eyes all the way back in their head when men are being men. And now, because I've been so good and like talked about all of this positive stuff, I'm gonna indulge and shit on men and toxic masculinity for a bit. It's like, literally, if like men have to have things be the way that they want them to be. If everything isn't just perfect for men, if they don't get their way, if there isn't some, if things don't go right, they throw a fucking tantrum. They don't cry because men don't cry, but they do fucking throw a tantrum like they're a child. They are incapable of dealing with even the most minor public setback the way that the rest of us constantly have to do. The rest of us constantly are made uncomfortable by men. We deal with your bullshit all the time, with the way that you look at us, the way that you talk about us, the way that you address us, the way that you condescend to non-men is awful. You gotta stop. And we fucking don't care. We're not impressed. No one gives a fuck. The people who humor you, that's what they're doing. They're humoring you. They don't enjoy it. Like, seriously, women especially, heterosexual women especially, put up with so much shit from men just because, by an unfortunate twist of fate, they are attracted to men. And it sucks. So seriously, get over yourselves, boys. Like, for real. It's like, you don't have to act that way. No one is making you do it. No one cares. The men that do care, who cares about them? Get over it. Get over yourselves. It doesn't fucking matter. No one gives a shit if you're the most masculine man in the world or not. We don't care. No one cares. You're not impressing anyone. Just stop. And now, this is a very short story, but I'm going to tell a little bit story. Yesterday, I was out. I was fully femmed up, wearing a bra, a skirt. I was looking cute and good. I was walking down the sidewalk, and there's these two disheveled bros somehow working as solicitors for some energy company, like Green Mountain Energy. I don't know what it was. They were on the sidewalk. They were talking to each other. They saw me coming by, and I did not make eye contact. I was walking past them, and one of them was like, "Hey, you got a minute to help the environment?" And just pretended like I didn't even hear him. Didn't even glance. Acted like he was not even there. And I kid you not, I like literally was like, this is like a more in real time sort of expression of how he did. He's like, "Hey, you got a minute to help the environment?" Oh, whoa. Like, and he was like shocked and surprised and disappointed by the fact that I didn't give him any attention, because men expect women and non-men to just lavish them with attention all the time, being mediocre as fuck. It's like, whatever. Here's another little short story. It's like, I was getting lunch yesterday. I was out. I went to a Sweet Green. It was like a me day. I was treating myself. And the guy who was making my salad tried to have a conversation with me. It's like, didn't put in a lot of effort. Saw that I was carrying a bag from the Strand, which is a bookstore in New York. He's like, "Oh, I thought the Strand was closed. They're still open?" It's like, that's not a conversation. That's not an interesting thing to say. Are you really trying? Are you like, it's like the thing that you thought was false is true, and you know that because I have a fresh bag from the Strand. It's just like, men don't have to try it all. Men don't have to put any effort into their social interactions, into the way that they dress, the way that they look, the things that they do. Men, obviously, there's so many examples of super mediocre white men just making their way through the world with like skating, like what is that song from Wicked? Like dancing through life. That is the song of white men, just like no effort. And it's because we live in their world. It's because we live in a world that they have made, where they have created this society that allows them to put in the bare minimum of effort and expect rewards, expect attention, expect conversation, expect non-men and women to want to please them. It's like, no, like, fuck that. Like, seriously, like, don't do it. Don't give men the time of day. Men need to earn that shit. It's been so long. It's been too long where men have just gotten whatever the fuck they wanted with no effort. We don't need to be giving them attention. We don't need to be rewarding them for the minimum possible effort anymore. Highly recommend acting like you don't know a man is there at all when they try to talk to you. It was that, like, passing by that guy who was trying to solicit me was, it's like I felt like a tingle go up my spine as I passed him and heard that sort of like sad, like, oh, like I really just strongly recommend it. Yeah. So, okay, that's the end of my fun little self-indulgent rant about men. I guess just to recap a little bit, masculinity in the West has been around for so long and has constantly warped itself and evolved based on the society in place. I think that mass media and social media have a huge role in why masculinity is the way that it is today, why toxic masculinity is such a strong thing. Obviously, patriarchy goes way back, way back. But this sort of like, we're living in a world where, like, on top of bad masculinity, we've like sort of evolved it and purified it into this really awful form where men are constantly lashing out at others, where they're taking out their insecurities on the world, and all of this masculinity is founded on this principle of needing to be more masculine than the next person, and that's where the insecurity comes in. Is men feel like they have to put people down. Men do put other people down in order for themselves to feel good. And that is sort of like the Western toxic masculinity, what I've been calling Western toxic masculinity in this video. By extreme sharp contrast, we have BTS. BTS, the K-pop group, they in their professional work, in their music and in their live performances, they urge their fans to love themselves. They urge, and it's such a simple thing, just like love yourself. But it's a thing that I hope you probably know just from interacting with men, toxic men. That's not something that they would ever do. That's not something that Western masculinity, toxic masculinity, has room for, is telling other people to love themselves, because doing that makes you vulnerable. If you tell someone to love themselves, you're admitting that you care about someone. Yeah. So BTS has that sort of, even on the foundation of their music, they're expressing a kinder, softer, gentler masculinity. And when you watch their interviews, their documentaries, their reality shows, you see that the way that they interact with each other is in this especially tender and almost romantic way, where they are openly showing affection for each other in non-ironic ways, in ways that are not guarded, in ways that are not insecure. They aren't insecure. Their masculinity comes from a place of self-love, self-satisfaction. They don't have to put other people down in order to be the best. And so it's really, really beautiful to see that, to witness that. I highly recommend watching Run BTS if you haven't. But beyond that, beyond just what they are, what they literally are in the world, what they show, what they share with us, fans of BTS Army, have created this world of fanfic, this world of AUs, of fictions, using BTS as template characters, using their personalities, giving them new relationships with each other. Sometimes they're brothers, sometimes they're lovers, sometimes they're dating and yearning, and it's all of this really beautiful, great, just like super light and enjoyable stuff. And by making these fics, by expressing these stories, by creating these stories with BTS as characters, the fans share and reproduce and create this world where masculinity doesn't have to be that hard, awful, competitive, combative, toxic thing that it is so often. It's like fans and fanfics and these worlds that BTS Army creates using BTS as characters. It just creates this sort of like really nice, safe, pleasant space. It envisions a better world where masculinity, where whoever men, it doesn't matter. They don't have to be K-pop idols. In a lot of these fics, they're not. There's one by @Taeyikes, highly recommend, TAEYIKES on Twitter. They do great AUs, highly recommend. But there's one where it's a Jungkook and Min Yoongi fic where they're in love with each other and they dated, but Min Yoongi is like going off on a sailing trip with his friends, and Min Yoongi and Namjoon have this low-key music production studio, but like J-Hope is just like a random like dance instructor, and Jungkook is an Overwatch streamer, and it's just like they don't have to be these figures that are above us, these idols in these fictions. They're just normal men that are able to express affection, that are able to have these relationships with each other, that are able to have these non-violent interactions with each other. And I think that looking at that, seeing those worlds that these people are creating, this is such a beautiful act of creation, honestly. It makes me so happy. When I found out that this stuff existed, when I started reading some of them, it's just like so emotional, because that is the first step. The first step to making the world a better place, to making a better kind of masculinity, is imagining it, is allowing yourself to believe that even in the world of fiction, this could be, this could happen. Men could act this way. And I can't stop. I'm just like gushing at this point, I know. But really, like, looking at that is the blueprint for masculinity. That is where masculinity needs to go, because, you know, masculinity is destroying the world. Masculinity is destroying the world and hurting people. Like, why it doesn't even have to be destroying the world for it to be bad. It's hurting us, and it's hurting men. Let's get rid of it, and BTS is the way. So yeah, just that's was my little recap for what we talked about in this video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for participating in the conversation. Really, 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 really love it. And yes, as Isabel just said, sparkly BTS masculinity, infinitely superior to Western masculinity. Oh, okay. Arden said, society has definitely fricked me up as an AMAP person. You and me both. Fun to try and work on. Yeah, it is fun. It's like, it feels, for me, it feels like peeling off like these like hardened layers of shell that I've constantly been putting on throughout my whole life as an AMAP person, who had been trying to fit in as a man in society before I came out as non-binary. All of these sort of stiff shells that don't really fit, don't allow me to move the way that I need to, that is natural, and pulling them off, it can be a fun experience. Once you start pulling it off, you're already more free. Once you are able to envision yourself as not a man, you're more free, and it is fun. It's not just a hard thing to do. Like, I want to express that to people who are maybe questioning about their gender identity. It can be hard. It's difficult. It's not always easy to sort of introspect and really look hard at these assumptions that we've made about ourselves. But it's also so liberating and so pleasant, and you get to be. I love wearing makeup, and I couldn't do that as a man when I was being a man. There's so many things about my life that I love, that I get to enjoy now that I'm not a man, and highly recommend it. Have I ever heard of Dorian Electra? No, I have not heard of Dorian Electra. Who or what? Dorian Electra is an American singer, songwriter, and performance artist. Oh, cool. Word. I'm gonna check them out. Thanks for the recommendation. Yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for joining me. I do this every week on Wednesdays, different topics, different whatever. But yeah, it was fun, and I really enjoy talking to people. Okay, cool. I will watch that. Ooh, cool. Looking at the comments for those of you just watching the video. Yeah, so thanks again for joining. I really, really appreciate it. And it's a lot of fun to talk with y'all and to have this space where we can talk about this stuff. So thanks for watching. Take care and love yourself.